The only damage to his body was his head, from his right eye socket to the back of his head. His right shoulder was dislocated.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. So that is something that is truly idiosyncratic about this. The injuries to Stephen Smith are elevated. They are on his face, on his head, on his upper body, his shoulders, and then his arms. Virtually no injuries on his feet, legs, hips, lower torso. And so what does that tell us? Now, in terms of the number 2 clue we all missed, we get that insight from asking a very simple question. Where was Stephen Smith found? And the reason why we're asking this question is we're trying to intuit a sense of how are the Murdaughs involved, if they are involved. And also, to some extent, who is involved if they're involved. And so we want to get a much deeper sense of where. And clue number 2 and clue number 3 are, take us deep into the fabric of exactly where this took place. And you'll see every successive clue, you're going to get a much deeper, richer understanding of exactly where this happened, how it happened, well, likely how it happened, and possibly who is involved. So our knowledge base is going to improve with each successive clue. So if you feel like the narrative is deviating from what you think, give it a chance, because we are trying to remain curious. We're trying to extend what we know. So if you've looked at the incident photos from the Stephen Smith case, did you notice that it happened right opposite a driveway? Did you notice that there's a house over there? And that is why the scene address is given as 6199 Sandy Run Road, because it happened right opposite one house on a long stretch of road. Did you know that? And so the SLED Crime Scene Department Crime Scene Notes actually provides the scene address, 6199 Sandy Run Road in Hampton. So the first thing to note is that what happened to Stephen happened within Hampton County. That's already telling us something. It's within the Murdaugh's legal hunting ground. It's within their sort of sphere of influence, right? And so now what we want to do is we want to go down to ground level and have a look at this terrain. What are we dealing with? And so when you visit this area using Google Maps, something weird happens. There's an anomaly. As soon as you approach Joe Miley Road, the camera abruptly stops recording the remainder of Sandy Run Road. But before we get to the rest of this episode, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Please do subscribe to the Team Peachtree channel. I'm trying to get to 1,000 subscribers before the end of the month. We've got 10 days to go and only about 120 subscribers to go. So please do subscribe. There's a surprise waiting for you if you do, but I'll let you know about that later. If you're enjoying this episode, please like, share, leave a comment. You'll notice I don't do that many lives, so if you want to show your appreciation for the content, you can hit the thanks button. And let's get started. So we can see from crime scene photographs that there are essentially 6 features to the crime scene. Number 1, the first is that one side is forest, the other side is an open field, right? And you might think, yeah, well, that doesn't really take us anywhere, but you're about to find out that it's really important to know that, to bear that in mind. Number 2, there's a kink in the road at the point where the incident occurred. There's a curve in the road. Number 3, there's a point just prior to the crime scene where the telephone wires above the road move across the road from the forest side to the cornfield side. And what this does is it also accentuates the sense of the road changing course to some extent. Number 4, there's a solid yellow line on one side indicating no overtaking for vehicles on one side of the road. That's also important because we need to ascertain where was Stephen lying, on which side of the road than the other. Number 5, The scene is close to a T or Y junction with Joe Miley Road. As I said earlier, it's also close to a driveway. You could even call it a concealed driveway. And so that's point number 6. There's a single concealed driveway just after this kink in the road. And there's a small dwelling associated with that on the forest side of the road. And it's due to this dwelling that we're able to pinpoint with an address in the middle of a totally rural area quite precisely where Stephen Smith was found. Now, I do think the idiosyncrasies of the road, which would be especially subtle at night to a pedestrian and a driver, are worth noting. And although we've noted them, we're not really going to explore them in any further detail in this analysis. We'll come back to that. For now, we are more interested in a general sense of just where is this? And so have a look at this map. We see that it's less than 10 miles from Moselle, right? Moselle is where Stephen's classmate Buster arguably was staying. And that's just 15 minutes drive. And so the question is, did Stephen summon Buster or summon someone from Moselle, and they then came to assist him, and then something happened? Now, Stephen's sister said he could easily have called her if he ran out of gas, but by the same measure, he could easily have called Buster as well. And so the question is, did he call someone? And if he didn't, why didn't he? And does it make sense that he didn't call anyone? Perhaps he wanted to inquire from the nearest inhabited house if they had fuel. Does that make sense? Does that question make sense? And that is something we're going to address in more detail. Now, I do think the fact that this incident occurred in Hampton County and was investigated by Hampton County and was not solved by Hampton County and is relatively close to Moselle is possibly important. But are we treating it with the appropriate amount of significance, or are we overemphasizing that aspect? So I do wonder whether it may not be a mistake to imagine Buster could be the only Murdaugh making use of this road. Where, for example, is John Marvin Murdaugh based? Where is Randy based? And do you remember that I said that this image may provide a clue as to what struck Stephen? Remember that? So let's ask another simple question. What does John Marvin Murdaugh do for a living? Well, he operates 2 equipment rental companies, right? And one is in Hampton and the other one is further south. And so what are we talking about here? John Marvin operates large type of machinery and equipment, unusual vehicles, right? And if you take a more careful look at what we're talking about, one of those centers, equipment rental centers, is, as I say, basically in Hampton, and the other closer to the coast, close to Beaufort, but not quite in that area, but in that general area. And so one question that I asked was, if John is transporting his own equipment from the one equipment rental center to the other equipment rental center, then what route would he take? And it turns out John Murdaugh, if he did do that, the routes would take him close to the incident scene, but not actually past the incident scene. That's also important to be explicit about. Do you follow my reasoning? It's this idea that if he was transporting between one of his equipment centers to the other, then would that road take him past the incident scene? And the answer is relatively close to it, but not past it. Now, although the Stephen Smith incident isn't on the direct route from John Marvin's Depot A to Depot B, it's possible if equipment needed to be transported to a nearby farm, or from Moselle to a nearby farm, or from a nearby farm to Moselle, it may have made use of routes like 601 and relevant roots, right? We also know via his recent exclusive interview with the New York Times that the third brother, Randy Murdaugh, also has a hunting property in the area. I'm not sure exactly where it is, but we know it's sort of in that area, in that general area. So it's important to fully flesh out the map in this case. Where do the Murdaughs live relative to this incident? Because we're trying to understand why a Murdaugh apparently called Stephen's father very early on and offered his assistance. He sort of offered to assist the Stephen Smith family free of charge. And we saw something similar to that in the Mallory Beach incident, where Alex Murdaugh went room to room and he seemed to be giving his advice and influencing the witnesses in that incident. And if you think about it, which Murdaugh offered to represent Connor Cook? Well, the answer is that it was indirectly, where Corey Fleming was provided, or what's the word, that contact was apparently provided by Alec Murdaugh. And who was Corey Fleming? Well, Alec Murdaugh's former college roommate. And so you had a situation of the Murdaughs involved in that incident, and then did that actually help it come to fruition? Did that help the lawsuit on its way? And so I think you can ask the same question with regard to the Stephen Smith case. Did a Murdaugh offering to represent Stephen Smith, did that help or hinder that that situation? And ultimately, I don't think Stephen Smith's father accepted the kind offer of Randy Murdaugh. But look where we are now, 7-8 years later, and it's still an unsolved case. So in case you're unfamiliar with this aspect, according to ABC, quote, Randy Murdaugh was the second person to call my dad after the coroner. And that is what Stephanie, that's Stephen's sister, told ABC. Randy said that he wanted to take the case and that it would be free of charge. But Stephen's father was a little iffy on accepting the offer. And when asked about all of this, Randy Murdaugh himself declined to comment on the statement that Stephanie made to investigators regarding his alleged phone call. Now, you would imagine if he didn't make it, it would be easy just to deny it. The fact that he declines to comment does make one wonder, why don't you want to talk about it? Perhaps he's got good reasons. Anyway, now that we've mapped the area and we've got a better sense of where the incident happened, we also have a better sense of which potential Murdaugh, if any, could be involved. And so the number 2 clue we all missed is that I think we need to look beyond Buster. And so this leaves 2 remaining questions. How did this incident happen? And what happened exactly? What was this object that struck Stephen and struck him down? What was that object? And so here is a clue to the how. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.